Guys, it's Meorah, and it is the last week of Sefirat Omer. So today happens to be Sunday, and we've got basically 1 week to go, a little plus or minus over a week, until we are on the final count of the Omer, and of course that leads us into Shavuot. So I feel like really great about where I've been throughout this whole process of the Omer, and I figured I would just frame a little bit more for you guys what I've been doing in terms of my spiritual work and what it's entailed, and basically why I'm doing it. So in my last video, I had explained that I really want to take this time, this whole period of the Omer, to really work on my active eating, and I refer to it as active holy eating, and really trying to just elevate myself when it comes to eating more consciously, eating more carefully, and I kind of went into that video, went into it in that video if you want to check it out, but I figured I would kind of delve more into it by framing for you guys what I really consider to be spiritual work from a Jewish perspective, although all this stuff I'm about to say is pretty universal, and just explain to you, yeah, basically what I'm working on when it comes to my spirituality and my progress and where I'm at and where I still feel like I need to grow a bit. So I guess just to frame this, I want to explain, well, I guess kind of two things. So I'll explain just the framework of how I really look at spirituality and the spiritual process. So hopefully that'll help you guys just as food for thought, as one possible framework for how you can treat your spiritual health, essentially, and how you can progress and grow as a spiritual being. So that's one side of this. The other is that I'm really applying it to my final push in the Sefirat HaOmer period. With 1 week left to go, I am basically like pushing hard to really continue my progress in terms of this idea of holy eating. And for me, that really means I'm going to be spending this last week working on some pretty hardcore fasting. And as for now, I think I'm really planning on doing at least at minimum a 3-day water fast. And I think that hopefully, like, I'm just kind of like giving that to myself as like a low bar of a 3-day fast. The longest I've ever done was a little over 24 hours from Yom Kippur and things like that. But I would like to get into that, and ideally what I would like to do is really fast from Monday until Shabbat, and then of course on Shabbat we don't fast, and then that will bring us all the way into Shavuot. So that's kind of my plan, and I will basically explain to you guys by the end of this video how I'm looking at just the whole framework of spirituality and spiritual work and what I'm working on, and how that basically applies to this final push and why the heck I'm doing this fast. So just to start, I guess I will explain that well, basically, I had a recent really great opportunity to answer the question of what is my life philosophy, and so I figured I would kind of share pieces of that with you guys. If you want to hear kind of the whole way I broke it down a little more formally, you can check out the link I'll drop here. But essentially, you know, it was a really great practice for me because there's just so many things that encompass what I feel like life is about, certainly from a spiritual, religious perspective. And as I really thought about it, you know, I think basically what it comes down to is that I do believe that we should all be aspiring toward godliness, and by that what I mean is that we want to become more and more like Hashem, like our creator, whose image we are created after. And what that means is that we're really working toward transcending ourselves, ascending past this egoic lifestyle, and really doing what we can to become closer and more unified, and ultimately unified with our creator, with Hashem. So to that end, I really think that there's like 3 different buckets of things that really stop us and really challenge us as human beings living this material life. And sorry, the wind is going a little crazy here now. So I think that those things really break down to 3 different areas, like I said. And the first one is the need to get over pride and honor, and I just kind of bucket this as pride. And by pride, I mean everything from seeking honor, from arrogance, from doing things for the sake of kind of puffing yourself up and comparing yourself to others and thinking that you're better than others, and all the kind of baggage that comes with that. So I think that's one big bucket of challenge for us human beings as we progress spiritually. And for some people, and I guess I'll say this, within all these 3 different categories, we all have our own personal tikkun. We all have our personal things that we kind of need to lean into more than others. So while all of these different categories certainly apply to each and every one of us, I'm sure there'll be certain areas where it might resonate a little bit more with you. For me, eating happens to be one of the harder spots, which is why I've really taken this period of Sefirat HaOmer to focus in on it, which I'll get into more later. But so yeah, pride, that's a big one. And I've definitely had, my challenges with this just as any other person. And it is something I feel like I've definitely gotten a greater hold on ever since I became observant and more mindful of this. So that, fortunately for me, is not one that I struggle with as much today. Of course, we always slip and fall, so always mindful of that. And just to that end, I do regularly, during my hitborudut, whenever I'm praying to Hashem, I regularly just ask him to please keep my heart humble. And I think that's just a great, easy blanket one for everyone to throw into their prayers, because who doesn't need just a constant reminder to stay humble? So pride is one big category of the spiritual work that we all have to do to really get closer to Hashem, to really, be able to transcend to that point of unifying with our Creator. So that's one big category. The next bucket is materiality, and what that means is all the material desires that we have, and I am so super duper guilty of this. I have made great strides on this as well, fortunately, ever since becoming observant. Materiality, I mean, it is what it is. It means the lust for material goods, the things like, just loving, I love luxury items. I used to literally, this is disgusting, but I will make this confession. I used to have an assistant that worked for me, and I would literally send her to Louis Vuitton during the workday so that she could scope out certain things for me, is how much I was just in that really gross world of materiality. I am a luxury lover. I love stuff. I love buying stuff. I love shopping. I used to have a total shopping addiction, especially when I just really lacked joy in my life. That was my addiction. That was what just fed me and just gave me a little hit of fake joy for a fleeting moment. So I've definitely been down in the trenches when it comes to materiality. It's something I still do struggle with, but I cannot no longer afford to really chase after all my material desires. Baruch Hashem for that. So it's not something, it's something I've really worked on very, very consciously over the last couple of years as it become observant, like I said. And something I did, really as soon as I started becoming observant, I really went through a huge minimalist purge, and I literally got rid of 70 to 80% of my material possessions. And like I said, I was an avid shopaholic. I would go into I would go into Home Goods and just buy a bunch of stuff I didn't need, and I just everything. And I loved doing that. So I had accumulated a good amount of stuff, even though I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and I just donated most of it. And every few months or so in the last couple of years, I've really whittled down my collection of stuff, and just really every time I'm just purging and taking a new look at things and wondering do I really need this, or can I give this away to somebody else? So that's just my MO now. I'm really at a point where you could fit all my personal possessions into an elevator that, just for sizing reference. Basically that's kind of as much stuff as I have. I still feel I can really whittle it down further, but I'm still working on it. So it's a constant thing, and it's constantly difficult not to buy stuff. I constantly want to buy more new things. So I do think materiality is a whole bucket, a whole challenge. This also goes in line with coveting your neighbor's house XYZ or whatever that somebody else has, and just feeling that envy, that desire, oh, look at what a beautiful bag she has, or look at that guy's house or his car, I want that too. And it's such a part of human nature, of part of the egoic drive that we have to just want to take things. And that essentially is a theme of all of these different categories I'll go into, is that it's really our instinct, it's our will to take from the world. And that is the thing that we're trying to transmute. That's the work that's really being done all across these different categories when it comes to spirituality. And I'll kind of go into this more toward the end, but there's a lot of really wonderful, incredible teachings from the Arizal that talks about this idea of really transmuting the desire to take into a desire to bestow. So we'll get into that in a bit, but anyway, materiality is definitely a big bucket. And just a little note on that, if that's something that you particularly struggle with, that's definitely, I know this phrase usually, refers to other things, but guarding your eyes. I find that when I just look at certain things, I'm gonna want them. If I start looking at some jewelry, I'm lusting over it. And if I just, refrain from even looking, then it really does help to just kind of ease the appetite, to just quell all those material lusts. So that's just my little tip. Just try to stay away from it if you are struggling with that. But that's a big bucket, and materiality is the second one. So my third one, this is I think this is the hardest. I don't know. For me, this is my more difficult arena, and that is the drive for physicality, right? So we had, just to summarize, the three different buckets then are pride, materiality, and physicality. So physicality can break down into several different tiers, I guess, different categories, subcategories. And physicality really comes down to your desire for food, comfort, which I'll call like comfort slash like sleep. Really, it's food, sleep, and sex. And those are the three different areas. So for me, I happen to particularly struggle with food. And so that's why I really wanted to, like I said, take this time as Sefirat HaOmer to really rectify my challenges when it comes to eating. And the thing about physicality is that they are part of natural life. You know, you can't avoid procreation, eating. Well, technically, I guess you can, but you know, in the life cycle, at least in a Jewish life, you know, at some point you will be procreating. You do eat. You have to eat to live, and you do have to sleep. So these are things that I find to be most challenging, because it's not that we can just totally walk away from them. More or less, I mean, you can't fully walk away from materiality, like unless you're gonna go live in a cave or something, but generally speaking, you can really build your lifestyle, you know, in such a way that you are careful of materiality, that you, you know, and you can work on, you know, seeking honor and pride and that kind of thing. But food, sex, and sleep, you can't really avoid in the natural cycle of human life. So that, for that reason, I find to be the most challenging. And so for me, when it comes to food, and I will just say, you know, I don't want to get into a weird conversation because of the sex category, but let's just say that in the other two subcategories, I've really made great strides and I feel great about where I'm at. That said, the food thing is still a very big challenge for me. So I have just always, you know, I think a lot of people can say they love food, but not everyone. I've definitely met people who kind of can take it or leave it, and they're like not that into eating, but I am definitely an eater. I love food. I just like revel in the experience of food. And for me, I do think there's a few different reasons I really like gravitate toward food, I think, aside from the obvious human things. And I think one of the reasons that I really gravitate toward food is that it really, for me, is a marker of my Korean culture. So I have really leaned into food as opposed to language or other options as a way that I really connect to my Korean culture and feel Korean. And to be honest, I think that that's really dangerous waters. And I think that a lot of people, especially in this day and age, I think that a lot of people are really overemphasizing the importance of food and in terms of how it relates to our culture. And I think that's going to be a very unpopular thing to be said, but I think that's the truth. And I think that we really glorify food in our culture nowadays to a point where it's very unhealthy. And so anyway, like that kind of aside, for me, the whole point of all these categories and of doing the spiritual work to really conquer ourselves and to be able to not let any one of these things really sway us is so that we can do our best job to match our will to Hashem's. And all these areas are areas where we have this like human instinct, this urge, sorry about the wind, this like urge to just feed our lust, feed our desires for these things. And so what we need to do is really be able to transcend that and get over that and say, I'm going to put aside my personal desire, my personal will for the sake of Hashem. And how can we do that? So this reminds me of something that I have heard one of my favorite Ravs, Rabbi Alon Anava. I love watching him on YouTube. I definitely recommend him. I've heard him say this a lot, that when he first became observant, one of the first things he did was that he knew that he had to quit his addiction to cigarettes, because he knew like that if he was going to be like serving Hashem, he couldn't do that if there was something that was always pulling him in another direction. If something had control over him, in other words, then he couldn't have control over himself to apply himself properly to the work of Hashem. And that's how I look at it too. And that just totally resonates with me, because I really feel like I'm at a point where, you know, I'm doing my best to dedicate my like life. I like to like literally like consecrate my life to Hashem in any way that I can. I want that to be my purpose. I want my life experience to be very much applied to serving my Creator, and that is my ultimate end goal. or rather the ultimate end goal is to reunify with our Creator. But in so doing, in this lifetime, we do our best to really serve Him and live by Torah and mitzvah, and just be the best souls as we can, rather than living just as these limited human beings, right? So that's the work that I'm doing. And when it comes to food, I really feel like I don't have a full control over food. If I, here's a very simple example, like if I'm davening and I hear like my sister cooking something in the kitchen, it smells delicious, I'm gonna get distracted, and like that's just a tiny little example. And no, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, that's human nature, okay? But that's the point, is that I really want to transcend certain aspects of my human nature so that I can be just above and beyond, so I can really dedicate myself with full focus and attention. And that's really what a lot of this work is about. None of these things in and of themselves are inherently bad or wrong, including pride. I think, pride motivates us oftentimes to do good things. And there is, in certain contexts, like certain drives are very healthy and positive. And from, a simple evolutionary perspective, these are certainly important things for us to desire. So we want to be mindful of that. So I'm not saying that any of these categories are inherently bad. Even desiring material possessions, there's nothing wrong with, liking beautiful things, for example. If you want to have beautiful Judaica, if you want to, dress very nicely, I think that's a great thing. But once that takes a hold of you, once it becomes an addiction, once it becomes something that you can no longer control, that's when you need to take a little time out and really work on just conquering that, to make sure that you're being mindful and that no one thing is pulling you against Hashem's will, essentially. And this all, of course, goes to the idea of our evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara. So again, for me, the Yetzer Hara is strongest when it comes to food. So, a great example is just overeating. When something just tastes good, we're chasing pleasure, we're chasing just that little hit of, that momentary fleeting hit of joy. And instead of really finding joy that's everlasting and real and true, we're looking for these fleeting moments. And, that's not the state I want to be in. I want to have more control over myself, more control over my ego. And that's really what this all boils down to as well. This is all ego work, as they say. And it also ties to the Jewish concept of bitul chayesh, and that is perhaps not a very popular term, because it doesn't sound great from our egoic, sort of sense of self. But bitul hayesh is self-nullification, and I think it's an incredibly important aspect of spiritual development that we should actually aspire toward. And people get very turned off and afraid of this idea of self-nullification. You mean you just want me to be like some religious zombie and not have my own heart and mind? Like God forbid, that's not what we're after. What bitul hayesh is really about is about overcoming your egoic drive, overcoming your sense of selfhood, so that you're really able to think more about the collective. And this even ties all the way to the Shema, and understanding that creation, that Hashem, that all of us are actually one. So I don't want to go too deep into this. This can kind of go into totally different territories, but I just want to show that this is all full circle, that when we talk about overcoming our instincts, overcoming our drives as human beings, what we're trying to do is elevate ourselves to the point where we have self-control, to the point where the Yetzer Hara is not pulling us in different directions, to the point where we're able to take that self-control and apply ourselves to match Hashem's will. So that is really what we're after in all of this, spiritual work over self-nullification, over getting rid of the ego self, however you want to call it. It all kind of boils down to the same thing. Let's gain control over ourselves so that we can apply that control, so we can apply all of our efforts, all of our heart and mind toward good, right? Toward Hashem. So that's the work I'm doing. So basically, kind of to go full circle with that, during this Sefirat Omer period, I've really been working, focusing not only on my eating, but also my health, because let's be real, some of this was just driven by, desire to lose a little bit of weight as well. So I won't say that was the primary goal, which is why I think it's been so successful so far, is that for the first time in my life, I'm not trying to just lose weight for vanity. It's just truly been my desire to serve Hashem more properly, so that I can have, like I said, that kind of self-control and that composure. So for me, what that's meant is that I did like a Whole30 thing where I cut out like dairy and grains and sweeteners and all things like that. So I did that for like the first 30 or more like 40 days or so, 30 plus days. And I've also been doing 1 meal a day and keto. So I've been on a pretty stringent diet, needless to say. And I've been kind of like somewhere around like anywhere from like 1,000 to 1,200 calories, like, which don't worry, I know some people say like that's unhealthy. I've actually been feeling really great and a lot more energized since I've been eating this way. And when I'm eating, I'm really treating my table as an altar, as like my food is a korban. Like I'm really being mindful with every bite, engaging with the food, being mindful of where it came from, thinking about what I'm going to do with that energy to apply it to Hashem. So I can apply it to studying, so I can apply it to davening, like using that energy ever so mindfully. And that was really my goal, was to be able to be just super mindful of the act of eating, the experience of eating, and being careful not to just eat in like a greedy, lustful manner to like chase my like taste buds, but rather to eat things that are healthy and that are going to really feed me in my avodat Hashem. So that's been a great success. On top of that, I've been just doing a lot more hitbodedut, a lot more walking. I've been walking at least like 4 miles, walking/jogging at least like 4 miles a day. So that's been really awesome as well. Something I definitely plan to keep up after the Omer as well. And I've lost like 10-ish pounds, more or less, maybe a little bit more, which has been really great. So I feel like I've been in a good spot in terms of my goals for the Sefirat HaOmer period. I've also been counting every day, Baruch Hashem. So that's been going really awesome. And I've been so pumped about just being so much more mindful of food, of the experience and all of that. So that was really kind of like my last big push in terms of all those categories I went through. All of those categories, by the way, it's a lifelong thing, but I know that for me, food is my greatest addiction. So I know that that's the thing that I really need to like really fight hard right now. So that's been, pretty much successful. At the same time, like I definitely have moments where I slip and fall and forget, that I'm eating for Hashem and I start eating for myself. In other words, like eating for pleasure. So like on Shabbat, for example, I'll allow myself like snacks. I'll actually have fruit, where during the other like rest of the week I won't have fruit because it's all sugar. And I find myself slipping. So I'm really still working on it. Of course, this work will not just, end after the Omer. I'm going to keep going with it. But what I figured I would do is, because we're on like the final push, this is the last week of the Omer. What I wanted to do was really go out strong, and I decided to do a full like fast, basically like a water fast, as you would call it, essentially not eating anything for a minimum of 3 days. I do hope to make it past that and actually go all the way from today's Sunday. I'm going to be eating normally today, like my 1 meal a day kind of thing. So from Monday until Erev Shabbat, I'm going to be fasting, hopefully that long. I will give myself just a minimum of 3 days. So we'll see how it goes at that point. From my understanding, after 16 to 25, 28 hours or so, that's kind of like the hardest part of it. And once you're past that point, your body kind of kicks into a different mode, and you're a little bit home free from the hunger. So I feel like I can do it all the way to Shabbat. So that'll be kind of my like bigger goal. So I really want to do this as a way to just really like send home, for me, just drive home this message that I am eating for Hashem, not for myself. And that is my big goal. And I just want to be able to conquer my hunger, conquer my physical lusts, to the point where I'm really dedicating everything in my being to Hashem. So that's where I'm at. And hopefully it will go well. I have a good feeling that it will work out well. Please don't be worried for me if this sort of triggers anyone for like eating disorders or anything like that. Like, I really hope that you can understand the sort of the framing of this for me, that it's not coming from an unhealthy place, at least not, from my perspective. And it is really just, what can I do to push myself further in my service to Hashem, in my avodat Hashem. So that's my version of spiritual work at this moment. Like I said, it's a lifelong, endless battle. Even after I'm able to conquer my hunger, hunger is something that we always have. So it's not something that I can just, relent on at any point in my life. And actually, let me just correct that, because it's not even hunger. I haven't even been hungry, like when I'm doing the 1 meal a day thing. I could honestly go for a way longer than that, which is why I feel pretty confident about doing this fast. I have really found that, as I'm just being super mindful of everything that I put in my mouth, I'm realizing that I am very, 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 very rarely, if ever, actually hungry from like a physical hunger perspective. I've realized that most of the times that I eat, like nearly all the time that I eat, I'm really chasing my appetite. So that's been like just a really helpful like reframing for me to just realize that most of the times I'm putting food in my mouth, like I am just doing it because it tastes good. And that's just one of the toughest things about this world that we live in, or at least for me here in America. Like we are more or less able to chase all of our appetites, which is a really tough, weird challenge in this day and age that we have. So that's something that I'm really fighting against. And I want to make sure that I'm not chasing my appetites anymore, and that I'm really feeding my body so that I can feed my soul. So that's my goal. Wish me luck, and let me know in the comments what kind of spiritual work you guys are doing, and maybe I'd love to hear like what out of the sort of different categories of the different buckets, whether it's pride or materiality or the different subsets of physicality, like what is a thing that really resonates with you? What is your hurdle? And just share. I loved hearing from you guys in the comments. It always just gives me so much joy to hear from you guys. And by the way, I'm sorry if I don't, I've kind of fallen behind, I don't know if I want to call it that, but I've been a little bit less engaging in the comments. I used to kind of like respond to every single one, but at this point, especially during the Omer, I'm just kind of like kind of hunkering down, so I just haven't been as engaging. So I do see all the comments, and I'm really grateful for them all. So please do continue to comment. I love just hearing from you guys. And I will be back after the Omer as well. So there's my update. I will give you another final update, of course, when I'm done with it. And wish me luck on this final week. I wish you guys all the best with the final count of the Omer. And I won't see you till after Shavuot. So have an amazing, wonderful Chag Sameach. Have a great, great Shavuot. Hope you all stay up all night to study, and I will see you guys on the other side. All right, thanks guys. Shalom Aleichem.